Brian Gutekunst said exactly what Packer fans wanted to hear on Thursday. It's time to ramp up the urgency and start trying in earnest to compete to win Super Bowls.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. This episode brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Brian Gutekunst spoke to media yesterday, talked about Jair Alexander, talked about a lot of things. The most important thing that he mentioned was intensifying the urgency to win a Super Bowl. Here's what he said.
In the year, I think for me, the thing that's been on my mind, I think, as we've concluded this season, is we need to continue to ramp up our sense of urgency. These opportunities don't come. The life of a player in the National Football League is not very long. We got a bunch of good guys in that locker room. We got a bunch of talented guys in that locker room, and yeah, I think it's time that we start competing for championships, right? And I think they're ready. I think they're, like I said, I think they are wired right. I think that group is the kind of guys that can do that. But, at the end of the day, you got to go do it.
Now, I know this. There are going to be those of you who are prone to cynicism, perhaps, that will say, well, why weren't we always doing that? Or perhaps more cynically, they will say, see, I freaking told you they don't care about winning the Super Bowl. Okay, let's take a step back. All right. Brian Gutekunst took over 2018. They got rid of Jordy Nelson and replaced him with Jimmy Graham. They paid a top of market tight end contract to Jimmy Graham. The next offseason, they paid Bukowski. They spent $150+ million in salaries on Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Adrian Amos, Billy Turner. Revamped and revitalized this team. They turned them into a Super Bowl contender overnight. Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst did that. Let's not forget that part. And then COVID happened. The salary cap went to SH, you know what, and they had to make some difficult decisions. Like, I think Zadarius Smith might have lasted a year longer in Green Bay had it not been for the issues with the cap thanks to COVID. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, they used every available resource in 2020 and 2021 to go try and win a Super Bowl. They're hiring, they're finding, 1 or 2 year mercenary contract guys. They're trying to bet big, see what you can get out of Devin Funchess, see what you can get out of Rick Wagner, see what you can get out of Jared Valdir, Snacks Harrison. They brought in guys to try and make this run with no salary cap space. In 2020 or 2021, with no cap space, they tried to add players. And remember, the trades in the middle of the year that they didn't make, Will Fuller gets suspended. They didn't make, this was 2022, the Chase Claypool trade. But all the trades, basically, that they could have made that they didn't make, it turned out to be the right moves for them to have not made those trades. Darren Waller would have been really fun. They tried to trade for him in 2021 and in 2022. Would have been really fun. But he was never on the field and was retired shortly after. So there's that part of it. But then what happened, right? 2021 happens. Davante Adams, it seems, knew the entire time that was it. He was done. Even understanding Aaron Rodgers may or may not continue to play there. He wanted out, felt disrespected. Maybe there is room for a return. But that made 2022 a reset season. And they knew, okay, got to add some young talent on defense, which is what they did in the draft. After the Davante Adams trade, they added 2 receivers, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. They bring in Sammy Watkins. They try and make this work. Just like a little bit like a competitive rebuild. Let's try and be as good as possible with this young team. And then maybe 2023, you can really go for it with Christian Watson in year 2 and Devontae Wyatt in year 2 and Romeo Doubs in year 2 and the investments that you made in 2021, hopefully paying more dividends than they ended up paying, right? And then you have to deal with the Rodgers mess. And then you're essentially starting over. They reset the clock in 2023 with Jordan Love. And it would have been stupid, bad, dumb to spend the 2023 season acting like they were going to go win a championship. Because they had no idea they not no idea, but they didn't know what was going to happen. You can't know, but when you go as young as they did, that was telling us something. They were telling us, we're not trying to win this Super Bowl this year. We're trying to build the team that can win the Super Bowl next year, the year after that. Okay? So then what did the Packers do after 2023? They go out and they beat Dallas. They lose to San Francisco, but give the 49ers everything that they can handle. What did they do? Replace their defensive coordinator that you hated. They revamped a position group in a way I've never seen a position group revamped in Green Bay. With Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, Javon Bullard, the investments made at the safety position that turned a weakness into one of the team's biggest strengths. They swap Aaron Jones for Josh Jacobs, which turns out to be a huge net positive for Green Bay. Josh Jacobs was probably the 3rd best running back in the NFL last year. I guess we're still saying this year. I don't know. The 2024 season. They were trying to go for it. Now they know this team, 11-win team, it's still the youngest team in the league. They were the youngest team last year. What does it mean to Brian Gutekunst to try harder than this? They went out and they signed 2 guys like Xavier McKinney at the top of the market, Josh Jacobs near the top of the market for running backs. What does more aggressive than that look like? And that's interesting here because we don't know. But it does signal that 2023, 2024, it was still a build part of the process. Yes, they thought they could compete for a title in 2024. They thought Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney, the rookie class that they bring in, and by the way, if Edgerrin Cooper stays healthy, if Jordan Morgan just stays healthy, maybe they beat the Eagles. I mean, seriously. That's 16-10 in the 4th quarter with a 3 turnover deficit. They had a real shot to win that game. It's tweaks, but it's probably 1 or 2 more big swings. It's probably a Davante Adams sized attempt or a T. Higgins. Now, I don't think the T. Higgins thing seems off the board because if Cincinnati's not going to pay him, they're going to franchise him and they're going to try and tag him, or they're going to try and trade him, if anything, or they're just going to tag him and let him play it out. I don't think T. Higgins is going anywhere without getting picks, and I'm not even sure that's happening. They might just tag him, and let him walk. Try and go win a Super Bowl in 2025. And whether he wants to do that, we'll see. Does he want to does he want to agitate for something more? The Packers have opportunities. There are pass rushers out there that could make sense for them. Khalil Mack, Josh Sweat, George Kuntz, coming off an injury, but off a really good 2023 season. There's guys out there that they could spend some money on. There's trades out there they could pursue. Myles Garrett does not seem super happy in Cleveland. I don't think that's going to happen, but maybe it does. Max Crosby, maybe he's really pissed about the Antonio Pierce deal. Maybe they bring in someone that he's not going to vibe with. Maybe he's not super happy about Ben Johnson or whomever. But I think Brian Gutekunst telling us, we got to ramp up the degree to which we are pursuing a title. He was also talking about intensity levels of the team, that everyone's got to be locked in. Everyone's got to be focused. He's talking about a top-down approach where it's like, we are trying to win this Super Bowl right now, today. There's no more of this young team nonsense. And Matt LaFleur kind of hinted to it. He said it's just a number, and I think two playoff runs is enough now. These guys, they've got experience. And that's true. Like, Jordan Love is a veteran as far as I'm concerned at this point now. 2 years as a starter, 2 playoff runs. Now you go. Now you go. Now they have to fix one thing. They have to figure out the pass rush. And there's one thing that I think is really holding them back. And we're going to talk about it next on Locked On Packers. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the game, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats, like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving the platform. Here's an offer specifically for Locked On Packers listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play that first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win it. Just play it. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. The other day, Matt LaFleur said one of his biggest disappointments was, maybe not biggest disappointments, but their expectation were they were going to play a lot of 3 deep, 4 under, and rush 4. That is not what they did. They played a lot more cover 2. They used a lot more simulated pressures, run blitzes, stunts, all sorts of stuff. And there's a lot to unpack here. Part of this goes back to the reporting that we did over at The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. That said, the moves being made by the Packers with their defensive front were not met with, and I'm being generous here, universal approval. That Jerry Montgomery, the former defensive line coach, had allies in the building among the players. And that there were players that thought that Montgomery, who had survived multiple regimes here, deserved to stay. There was also a feeling that Jason Rebrovich, who was promoted from pass rush specialist to defensive line coach in a 4-man front, that means everybody. It means edges and defensive tackles. That Rebrovich was more of a motivator, a rah-rah guy, not an in-game tactician, and not a developer of talent, because specifically he's not a tactician. He's not someone who's going to work on technique and game plan. He's more of a go run through someone's face. Now that's the reporting that we did. I would say the season bared that out. Lucas Van Ness did not take a step forward in the way that we thought he would. Rashawn Gary did not adjust to this new defense. Kenny Clark did not adjust to this new defense in ways that we thought they would. And the details were all over the place. They were all over the place. I mean, even in the Vikings game, the second to last game of the season, I don't know if you saw the video, but there's Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings posted it. Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark, your 2 best players on the front, run into each other trying to run a stunt. Run into each other. It's week 17. The aim points, the timing, the rhythm, you should have that down by then. That is a coaching problem. Now, I spoke to a league source who said it's also a scheme problem because they did not just often enough let Kenny Clark and Carl Brooks and Devontae Wyatt and Rashawn Gary just go hunt. Just go set up 5-man surfaces, one-on-one blocks, and just let them go. And we saw that actually against Philadelphia, where Carl Brooks just starts to win one-on-one. Rashawn Gary just starts to win one-on-one. And it created pressure on Jalen Hurts. They made a very good Philadelphia offensive line. They held that passing game to 131 yards of offense. That's really good work. That's really good work. Now, one of the big things that I was told about this defense coming in from a source close to the situation and again, this was part of our reporting, was that the hockey lines under Joe Barry would be no more. That Rashawn would be out there. That Kenny Clark would be out there. Let me just give you a frame of reference. When Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith came to Green Bay under Mike Pettin, they both played in 2019, 2020. 80+% of snaps. 80+% of snaps. Now they were healthy, but they're out there at least 3 out of 4 plays. Rashawn Gary played 59% of snaps in a 17-game season. 59. That's just not enough. Nick Bosa, for example, played 78% of defensive snaps. He missed 3 games. That essentially means he was playing almost every down in the other games. I mean, that tells you the difference. And it's not because you say, oh, well, Rashawn Gary's not as good as Nick Bosa. Okay, I agree. But you know who he is better than? Kingsley Enagbare, Lucas Van Ness, Brenton Cox, Preston Smith, Aaron Mosby. Like, what are you talking about? Why is he only out there 2 out of every 3 snaps when it should be 4 out of every 5? Why is it that on 3rd and 10, he's not out there? There should not be a 3rd and must pass situation in a game where Rashawn Gary is healthy and not on the field, where Kenny Clark is healthy and not on the field. It just should not happen. It's good to have depth, but you have to balance that with making sure your best guys are out there. Now, I will say this. When you look at the run stop win rate, ESPN's charting metric, Rashawn Gary was an elite run defender, which means on 1st and 2nd down, that's when you want him out there. Is as an elite run defender, that's when teams are most likely to run. But that's not what he's getting paid. It's not what he got $100 million to do. He got paid $100 million to go hunt quarterbacks. So while it is true that he's a really good quarterback, and by the way, TJ Slayton led all defensive tackles in run stop win rate. They need to re-sign him. Now, the good news is the Packers are doing something about it. We got the reporting last night from Rob Domofsky that Jason Rebrovich is out as the defensive line coach. And we just heard from Matt LaFleur, 24 hours ago, that they've already started the interview process. That Ian Rappaport reporting that the Packers have already started inquiring about candidates set to interview Jets defensive line coach Aaron Whitecotton, which suggests maybe Robert Saleh had a conversation with Matt LaFleur. Hey, if you're going to fire Jason Rebrovich and hire somebody, maybe the guy that I just had on my staff was someone to look for. Also, Derek Ansley, the passing game coordinator, getting an interview for the Falcons defensive coordinator job. With Jeff Hafley in demand, there's going to be some turnover here. The Packers have to be ready for that part of this, because I know this is a new thing for Packers fans, for the Packers organization. This defensive staff is going to be in demand. If they continue to play this way, they're going to have some answers. And for Matt LaFleur, who does not have a sparkling track record on hiring defensive coordinators, that's going to be a question until he's able to do this 2 times in a row, because Jeff Hafley, look, he might be a head coach sooner than later. The Packers are going to have to get this next defensive coordinator hire right too. But the other part of this is you look at someone like Devontae Wyatt. He played 33.2% of defensive snaps last year. Now he missed some time, so 41% of snaps in the games that he played. In 2023, it was 50. So is he not trustworthy as a full-time starter? This is the problem since the beginning, since the very first time he was drafted. That 2022 draft, man, Zach Tom is awesome. Christian Watson, Sean Ryan, those guys are major contributors to this team. Romeo Dobbs too. Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt are just not good enough consistently enough. Devontae Wyatt on a per snap basis, hell yeah, man. He's a very good interior pass rusher. On 3rd and 8, he's great to have out there. Not on 1st and 10. Not on 2nd and 8. Not on 2nd and 4. 40% of snaps for a first round pick is brutal. It's brutal. And I don't, I think Carl Brooks ended up playing more snaps than him. That makes sense to me. He's a better player. He's a more consistent player. So that's a problem from a team building perspective. If there's going to be one impact player that the Packers bring in this offseason that they spend money on, to me, from reading the tea leaves here, listening to Brian Gutekunst talk, listening to Matt LaFleur talk, for Matt LaFleur to be as open and honest about the 4-man front not being as good as they thought, it is a damning indictment of the development of Lucas Van Ness, who they needed more out of in year 2. It is an indictment, I think, of the coaching that Rashawn Gary was not out there more. We saw Rashawn Gary when he was on the field. He was a really useful player. He's got to be on the field 80% of snaps, and he is in incredible shape. The problem is if you're having to get off run blocks and eat 2 on 1st down and 2nd down, you might be gassed for 3rd down. So maybe give him a little break on 1st down and get Lucas Van Ness out there. I know he can hold up at the point of attack against the run, so let's see it. But I think if there's one position where they need to add this offseason in an impact player, it's on the edge. And you might say, well, but they could use, Devontae Wyatt's not living to expectation. Kenny Clark. Okay. The best edge rushers win 25-ish% of the time. Danielle Hunter led the league in pass rush win rate every time. Pass rush win rate by ESPN's metrics. 26%. Chris Jones led interior defenders in pass rush win rate at 16%. Interior defenders, unless they're Aaron Donald, are just not going to produce. And by the way, the best Chris Jones plays as a pass rusher is usually up the middle, but he also can slide out and play base defensive end in run situations and all kinds of things. So there's value. I'm not saying Chris Jones is not as good or useful a player as Danielle Hunter. I'm just saying their win rates on the interior, those guys just don't win as often because it's easier to just wad up the protection, to have the center come over. You're not going to get one-on-ones as much as Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson on the edge just coming off. You got tight ends that you can use and running backs, and there's ways to do it, but those guys are just more effective. So if you could get a Max Crosby, let's say, a Josh Sweat in free agency, who I mentioned, a Malcolm Kuntz in free agency, who I mentioned, maybe you trade up in the draft to get one of these pass rushers. If you want a pass rusher, a premium pass rusher, you got to use a 1st-round pick on it. And we're going to talk next week about the 1st-round pick thing. I know there's been a lot of criticisms of Brian Gutekunst in these 1st-round picks. There is one draft that I thought was heinous from a process standpoint and has turned out from an outcome standpoint to also be bad. That's 2022. We're going to talk about that and my takes on why that's really just the one that I think you can be upset about. But here's the other problem, or another problem. The wide receivers have the same rotation issue. We'll talk about that to close out another week of Locked On Packers. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes are waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back. And then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, taxes can be matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as, today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention so they can work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress, which allows you to focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. You know how there's this discussion about the Packers wide receiver 1? Wendell Fajeda had these stats, friend of the pod, Wendell. Jaden Reed led the team in snaps, 63%. He is a slot receiver. So he's really only out there if they're in 3 receiver sets. Romeo Dobbs at a shade under 61% was next. Dontavian Wicks, 54% was next. Christian Watson, 51%. He is 4th. And then Bo Melton played 23% of snaps. Malik Heath played 15% of snaps on the season. Now that is with a receiver room that was really healthy. You can't really blame the injuries. Christian Watson got hurt last week of the season, but I don't understand any of that. And here's the problem. You have 4 guys who have played over 50% of the snaps. That means you're mixing and matching. And then you've got another guy who played almost a quarter of snaps. It's just not enough. And the thing is, you don't have to be a great player, but being out there helps you get a rhythm. One of the reasons why this whole Packers number 1 receiver thing is and we talked about this yesterday with Jason Hirschhorn, the egalitarian system is cool. It is. When you just, hey, whoever's open. Ball finds energy. That whole thing. It's really cool when you have, let's say in basketball, when you have an 8-man rotation and you know exactly, everyone knows their roles, they know their situations. This is a young team where they're jockeying for position. Everyone wants the ball to the point that the guy that you would have thought was least likely to bitch about not getting the ball is the guy bitching about getting the ball. These are human beings. You need to be out there. It's the same with pass rushers. You need to be out there to feel the flow of the game. How do you set guys up on a pass rush or a route if the guy running the route on the next play is different? How do you create a rhythm doing that? And while I have been probably the biggest vocal supporter of the depth of this group, I think it's cool that they have 6 guys that they trust to play at least 15% of snaps, that they have 4 guys they trust to play 50% of snaps. But it does feel like if they had 3 guys they really trusted, or 2 guys they really trusted, who were really good, even just 1 guy who was really good, then it would make all of this simpler, easier, more straightforward. And if you treated one of these guys like a wide receiver 1, that the roles of everyone else fall into place. And this is why I always feel like the criticisms of the way that the 2020 and the 2021 teams were built didn't make sense to me. That, to me, Matt LaFleur has talked about it. It's so cliche at this point. The idea of building a receiver room like a basketball team. You have your go-to scorer in Devontae Adams. When you need a bucket, he can get it for you. There's so much value in that. And then you need your role players. You need your rebounder, shot blocker. That was Alan Lazard. You need your streak scorer. That was Marquez Valdez-Scantling. 3-point shooter. Big play guy. You need your defender. Maybe they didn't have Mercedes Lewis, right? You add the tight ends in here. Your lockdown wing defender, Mercedes Lewis. Cool. They had every body type you wanted. But what in a perfect world you'd have is you'd have a go-to scorer and then you'd have a killer secondary scorer who could also, do these other things. We think about the big 2s, the big 3s in the NBA, to have a Giannis and a Dame, to have a LeBron and an Anthony Davis. And it's becoming increasingly clear that the teams that have, the Jason Tatums, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Derek White, that depth is super valuable, but you need to have some more on the high end than the Packers currently have. So if they had 4 guys, let's say, and I'm trying to think of what is the easiest middle ground group of receivers that I can put together here. But like, oh boy, trying to do this on the fly. You need to have at least one high-end guy. And I don't want to pick someone that's like so high-end. Like Justin Jefferson. Okay, obviously. But let's just say Davante Adams. You have Davante Adams. He is your bucket getter. It'd be really nice to have someone like T. Higgins. For the same reason, like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins works great. You have a Justin Jefferson. It's really useful to have a guy as good as Jordan Addison. And I think someone like Jaden Reed with a true number one can be that force multiplier for someone like Jaden Reed. That all of a sudden, everything Jaden Reed does is so much more valuable to your team if you had a Davante Adams. That everything Christian Watson gave you is so much more valuable if you had a true number one. Like a Davante 2019, 2020 Davante Adams with 2022 Christian Watson and 2024 Jaden Reed. That receiver room smokes people. And then you can have Romeo Doubs out there. You can have Dontavian Wicks out there because Davante Adams is not going to play 100% of snaps. And then every once in a while you throw Bo Melton out there. You run the Tyler Ervin package stuff for Bo Melton. Malik Heath can step in a pinch as a blocker, as a goon, all that good stuff. Man, that is a receiver room that really, really is cooking. And I think that's what they have to be looking for here. I do think there would be value in just saying, look, Romeo Doubs, it's been fun, but we can't do the complaining. You got to go. Now, Christian Watson being hurt complicates that. But even so, if you add a primetime frontline player, let's just say Brian Gutekunst mentioned that, not just conveniently mentioned, that when they took Elton Jenkins, they had DK Metcalf and Deebo Samuel rated pretty similarly. DK Metcalf has 1 year left on his new contract, and Jackson Smith-Njigba is a star already in Seattle. 3rd round pick and stuff. What about just like Jair for DK? Let me readjust my glasses. Jair for DK. Think about that. Doesn't that sound fun? The ultra version of Christian Watson. The version of Christian Watson that has already proven that he can be a 1,000-yard receiver and a big-time playmaker. DK Metcalf running all those clear out routes. DK Metcalf running all those deep overs. DK Metcalf running those sideline go balls. And then you still have Jaden Reed. Think of how much better Jaden Reed is if you have DK Metcalf clearing space for you. Brian Gutekunst talking about wanting to go all in. Those are the conversations that you got to start having. The Eagles were able to go to a Super Bowl thanks in part to making a bold move for A.J. Brown. It's time for Brian Gutekunst to get bold. Let's see if he can. Evan Williams, back on the show next week. We're going to talk to him about the end of the season, where he's going from here. And hopefully we'll be able to talk to him a couple times over the course of the offseason. We'll see what we can get scheduled here. Of course, I want to be aware of his time and the work that he wants to put in the offseason, all that good stuff, and his chance to get a break too. He needs a break. We all need breaks. Follow me on all the social medias and do the same with the podcast. Go subscribe, give us a review wherever you find podcasts, and then do me a favor. Go subscribe over on our YouTube page. We'll be live. We're going to be at the Super Bowl. Maybe be live from the Super Bowl a little bit. We'll see. Be at the Combine. A lot of fun stuff coming your way this offseason so that you can stay locked on Packers.